Welcome to the Brain Body Fit podcast. I'm Dr. Jerome Rerucha, and I'm here to help you cut through the noise of fads and quick fixes and focus on proven strategies for optimizing your health and peak performance. Join me as we explore regeneration, anti-aging breakthroughs, nutrition, and the power of improving your physical and mental strength to unlock your brain and body's full potential. Welcome, everybody, to the Brain Body Fit podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jerome Rerucha. Today, we're privileged to have retired Marine Captain Gavin West with us. Gavin, welcome to the show.
Hey, a privilege to be here.
I'm going to just start putting a little layout to the audience right now. So hopefully we're going to have people that are young, aspiring people going into the military. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of doctors listening to this, strength and performance specialists. And so this is really a perfect example of what Brain Body Fit really represents, where we want to focus on healthy lifestyle, although even pushing ourselves to maximum limits, whether it's in athletics. Here we have an accomplished special forces soldier that we're going to go through his career and bridge all these things together. So an incredible amount of academic accomplishments, as well as ranking within the military, grad school, professional business after the Marines. So we're just going to lay this out. So whatever you're coming here for to listen to this, I hope you get a lot out of it, whether, again, you're an aspiring person going into the military to kind of learn some things and maybe prepare yourself from the experience that Captain Gavin has had this whole time, as well as looking at elite training, what might be improved and how things have changed since he started his career, as well as doing that kind of elite type of training. You're going to sustain some injuries without a doubt, and how he's worked with those things and still functioning at a very high level of training in his life, but not without effort and constantly thinking of better ways of how to do this. So just as an introduction, where were you born, Gavin? And let's take you up to high school.
I was born in Houston, Texas, but my family kind of was from the Midwest and moved back there when I was like the age of 3. So I live in Houston now, but I don't really have any recollection of when I was first there. But I grew up between northern Indiana, just kind of south of the Indiana-Michigan line, and sort of northeastern Indiana, and way extreme northern Michigan. If you go to Google Maps and you zoom in on the northern little bit of Lake Michigan, you'll see a handful of islands out there in the middle of the lake, 30, 40 miles offshore. And my family's been there since like the mid 1800s. And so I spend summers and vacations and Christmas and kind of, any of those types of times there. And then the rest of the time in Indiana, where my dad owned some businesses and where I went to high school.
I did look up Beaver Island on the map, and it is truly an island. And so what's the basic population there? I mean, what was it when you grew up there? Because you at least spent your entire
It's an interesting place. So there's about 500 year-round residents, almost all of them extended family. And, the summer it swells to a couple thousand with beach residents and, kind of vacationers. But it has a very interesting history. The Mormons, when they headed out west to Utah, a subgroup broke off and actually moved up to Beaver Island in like the 1840s, 1850s. And my family, a bunch of Irish fishermen and French fur traders, engaged in a bit of a little war with each other over the island. So it's a very unique place, very unique folks. But my family, I don't know, we must have been bred for athletics, because I think all my cousins, all of us who lived up there, everyone played D1 football or things of that nature. So the breeding stock was at least good from this little intergenerational war between Mormons and Frenchmen and Irishmen.
Low population and high output. So in high school, again, you kind of led into that. You were an elite athlete. And so obviously a lot of training early on. So just kind of go through some of the sports that you played.
Yeah, I would take issue with the word elite. I was fortunate enough to be around some elite athletes. I had, a good friend who ran in the Olympics. We had a friend who made it to the NBA out of sort of my peer group. But I was anything but elite. I gained any athletic success I had through really training and hard work, which is one of the reasons I've become a fan. I mean, you would see kids that they didn't have to do anything, and they were just so naturally athletic they could outcompete other people, right? And to be able to stay on the court with them, or on the football field with them, or to be able to pitch against them or hit against them in baseball, I had to work really hard. And so that's one of the reasons I became fascinated with training and performance, metric-driven enhancement of training and things of that nature, because at a very early age, I recognized that, not everybody is gifted the same skills. I was fortunate. I was pretty lucky when it came to academics. But athletics, God gave in one and he took away in the other. So I had to work hard to make up on one, for sure.
Well, that's impressive to set that foundation, because I think there is a point, me being a full-time strength coach before even being in Division I, you see people that hit the genetic lottery. And of course, you want to recruit those people. Many times they're not the hardest workers on the team. And, they did have some certain privileges, which is great. Not putting that down at all. That is absolutely awesome. But I think is even the point we're getting across here too, the people that really had to do hard work, and it's not just physical intensity. There's a lot of intelligence that goes into making yourself a physical specimen. And so this is a great example of just that, of how hard you physically worked early on. And I think it's great you mentioned that you were academically gifted, not physically gifted, but how you really put that together in a package. And another unique thing, even in high school, you were on the debate team, which again, as you look at a jock and putting that academic work to use early on, and even on the debate team, I could say that's a pretty unique combo starting off.
Yeah, I fared better in debate. I was a state finalist a couple times, went to the national championships. So, I had that sort of lottery when it came to the gift of gab. I had to work pretty hard to get my 40 down to 4.8 though.
Yeah. All right. So all that high school success and the complement between the physical training and the academic training led you to the Naval Academy in 1996. Why don't you just tell us about that experience? And
Yep. So for those who don't know, the service academies, West Point, the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy, and the Coast Guard Academy are the premier training facilities for officers and academic facilities for undergraduate education of the officer corps within the military. You also have ROTC and other ways that people can enter the service as officers. But the academies were established in the early 1800s to train, the generational leadership of the military. And so it's very competitive to get in there. You have to be an athlete. You have to be athletically, very astute. There are tens of thousands of folks that apply for roughly about 1,200 slots a year. Particularly when I was coming in, we were coming off the tail end of like Top Gun, which quadrupled the application. So it was very competitive. You have to get a congressional nomination. So I had to go through boards against 50, 70 other candidates, interviewed by my congressman, a panel he set up. You have to do an incredible amount of medical screening. In fact, one time, I had missed one question on, I forget the name of it. It's the color vision test where you've got the dots and the numbers, the numbers of different shades of red or green. And I missed one of them. I had to drive like 8 hours to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to take some test from the 1800s called the Farnsworth Color Lantern Vision Test to supplement my earlier medical thing. And I missed one question on it. So really rigorous screening process. And then 4 years there of just really rigorous physical, mental, military training, ethics training. So a really complete package to prepare you to, I graduated just a month after I turned 22. And, I was literally in charge of dozens of people and tens of millions of dollars of equipment at, basically as a kid. When I look back on it, I was barely more than a teenager. So they work really hard to train you and instill a high degree of discipline in you, right? And so that becomes a very hallmark part of your life as you go on.
Well, it's significantly weeded out even once you get there. As I had a friend that went through that process, and he didn't make it the first time he got accepted to the Naval Academy. I mean, he was there, but obviously he dropped out at that time. So being aware of those rigors that they took to get to that point, and I'm sure there's so much hard work that goes into getting there. And then when you get there, you kind of almost want to put a sigh of relief and hold your hands up in victory formation, but then the reality hits a hurry of it's just beginning, and that doesn't even that doesn't stop. So then the massive accomplishment of graduating the Naval Academy, and then we'll get into your military career here pretty soon, and the success didn't slow down there either. Now, who kind of inspired you? Again, you kind of did a really good backstory with the athletics and the uniqueness of Beaver Island, and kind of a little hot spot there for turning out some Division I talent, especially per population. But when we start talking about, the Naval Academy, not just going into the military, there's a distinct difference, especially for a person of that age. So was that self-driven, family-driven, mentor somewhere in the process?
Yeah, so my dad was a Marine. I had my grandfather, his brothers, World War II Marines. So, definitely a family emphasis on it, not a requirement, but just a high degree of respect for the service. And so I guess, from the time I started picking up sticks when I was 5 years old, they were a machine gun. And I literally ran around the woods barefoot for months out of the year. And there's not much of a better prerequisite for being a Marine than running around the woods, chasing down snakes and turtles and the kind of stuff you did as a kid. And then when I started, having some academic success and was looking at going to schools, the Ivy League, the Stanfords, the Notre Dames, and had that opportunity, I sort of learned about the Naval Academy, and it's in that league of schools, and was going to allow me to become a Marine and allow me to sort of do the things that I loved. And so, when you find a location that is sort of the nexus of all those things that you want to do, that's really what inspired me to want to be there. But it was definitely a family foundation of admiration for the country, respect for the military. In our house, that was sort of one of those roles or jobs, so to speak, that was looked at with the most esteem. So that instills it in you from an early age.
Yeah, so a real value system was put there, and that's great. And so I don't want to bypass your time at the Naval Academy, but we have so much to get to of accomplishments, especially through your Special Forces career. But before we get to that, is there anything you want to share through Naval Academy, like even preparations for anybody, going there, or just anything that you'd want to share?
Yeah, if I was going to, some 15-year-old sophomore asked me, hey, what do you got to do to get in the Naval Academy? I'd say, do as much athletic and as much academic things as you can in your school. The more varsity sports and high-level academic extracurriculars, whether that be debate or, these days the science and robotics and things like that. They're looking for extremely well-rounded people. At the Academy, they want you to be able to go from boxing one day to organic chemistry the next, right? And so it takes a well-rounded individual to be able to do that. So, cast your net wide and, work very hard. And then, it is from a physical standpoint, if we're talking about the kind of physical performance side of things, it is, a lot of endurance, right? I mean, you're led by your physical preparation program there. Your kind of basic PT is led by SEALs. It's not as hard as BUDS, but it is way harder than the average Navy boot camp, right? I mean, you are forced to the physical standards there. Like failure is basically like an A on the regular Navy PFT. So, get yourself in really good shape, get cardiovascularly fit, and get comfortable in the water if you're not already comfortable in the water, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing things called the 40-year swim. We just got to be able to swim in camis for an hour straight. So there's a lot of things like that are going to test you if you have sort of gaping weaknesses. So identify what your strengths are, amplify them, and then work to mitigate your weaknesses.
This episode is brought to you by VibePlate Whole Body Synchronous Vibration Platforms. If you're seeking an additional health and performance edge, VibePlate transforms exercise, recovery, rehab, and aging. Unlike typical vibration that uses a shaking stimulus, VibePlate's parallel wave synchronous vibration technology enhances and integrates muscle and brain connection like no other. Not only does VibePlate increase recruitment and improve neuromusculoskeletal function, It coordinates the brain-body communication and piezoelectric activity. For athletes, Viplate optimizes warm-up and cool-down and can be used during peak performance exercises. With most units rated for 2,400 pounds, it's built for heavy lifting, intense training, and lasting durability. In rehab, it's a true game changer, accelerating circulation and recovery for sprains, strains, post-surgery, concussions, and many more measurable benefits to both patients and clinicians. For the elderly, it promotes graceful aging, preserving physical and mental health, even aiding those with severe degenerative conditions. Great for at-home use. Go to Viplate.com to see all available models. At checkout, use code BBF15 to receive 15% off. That is BBF15 and advance your health and performance today. Yeah, so myself as well, having a lot of respect for the military and, recognizing just the high achievement level it takes to go to special forces, and you are, even as we'll get into it, a commander within the special forces. So a very, very high level of achievement responsibility. So kind of recap on that though, you hear so many interviews of people with unique backgrounds, from every make and model is you'll hear people who have been through the process. But, so track and field, but like wrestling, the grind of wrestling, the cardio pain of wrestling. Obviously you said swimming, so even water polo at just swimming sports, I've heard people go through that and they said what an advantage that was for them, going through some of those things. So at times don't overthink it, but yeah, the well-roundedness, especially as we get into your career and the specialties of going to sniper school. And I know people are going to be really interested in learning about that. So even at this early age, I'm sure not just the physical focus of things, but as you talk about the academics, math and science, even want to touch on that just a little bit. Like you probably can't get into the Naval Academy through shop class.
Yeah, you raise a really great point because, I was a political science major at the Naval Academy. I also essentially graduated with an engineering degree, right? Because they're sending so many officers on technical tracks, particularly in the Navy. You could be a political science grad like me. And in fact, I've got history and poli-sci grad friends that were engineering officers on nuclear submarines. So you want someone who is pretty academically capable and sound in engineering if they're going to be working on a nuclear reactor underwater, right? So everyone there, I remember the first day of chemistry, we covered 2 semesters worth of high school chemistry in one afternoon, right? And even though I was a poli-sci major, I'm taking things like differential equations, thermodynamics, electrical engineering. And so, you're going to, whether you want to be on sort of the social sciences side or the pure sciences side or the applied sciences engineering side, you are going to get a full dose of math, of science. And the great thing about it is the reasoning that comes with it, right? Things are a little squishy on the social sciences, right? We're talking about people's emotions and opinions and things of that nature. But the hard sciences really teach you how to analyze things. And when it comes to medicine, and when it comes to what, we're going to talk about some today, when it comes to, improving performance, metrics and results and those type of things, not just how you feel about it, but if you're actually really able to apply those concepts and take metrics and really judge improvements to see what works and doesn't work, you're going to have more success down the road. And it really lays a good foundation for that.
Now, through the Naval Academy, then, how did you get that selected into the ground intel officer?
Yep. So you essentially compete. So Naval Academy, you say we graduate 1,000 people roughly each year. There's an event called service selection. For 3 years, you train, and then at the beginning of your senior year, you put in your requests at what you want to do. If you're a SEAL, you're doing things like mini buds. If you're a Marine, you're going to a program called Leatherneck. And you got to compete against everybody else there who wants that. And so, for instance, in the Marine Corps, about 150 people a year, roughly. I think it's a little bit more than that now, but roughly 15 to 20% of the class is able to go to the Marine Corps. Roughly 35% of the class want to go to the Marine Corps. So, it's a 50% attrition rate or, non-selection rate or whatever. So you go through months of training in the summer where you compete against each other, plus everything you do there academically and extracurricularly, how you interact with the Marine officers there that have a hand in selecting you. And then those that are selected you graduate, you get commissioned, and you go to this thing called TBS. So no matter what your commissioning source, so a good chunk of the Marine Corps officers come from the Naval Academy. You have others that come through ROTC, and then you got others that go through a program called like PLC or Bulldog, where they go right to OCS, maybe out of a Texas A&M or a school like that, and they got 12 weeks to catch up on all the basics, right? It's boot camp for officers. It's pretty brutal. And then everybody rendezvous in Quantico, and 6 months of what's called the basic school, which teaches you how to be a basically trained infantry officer. Whether you're a female adjutant or whether you're a future Marine infantry or a reconnaissance officer or whatever, you all go through that, and it teaches you all the basics. It's one of the things that's unique about the Marine Corps. No other service does that like that. But I've seen junior female officers take over in infantry style situations, fall back on their training from TBS, and do exceptional jobs. And I don't know that any other service it prepares their folks like that. The other thing that happens when you're at TBS is you got to compete for your actual MOS, your military occupational specialty. So I didn't show up at TBS knowing I was going to be a ground intel officer. I had a TBS class of roughly 350 people, and they had like 6 slots for ground intel because it's one of the most sought after and smallest fields. So you got to compete against everybody there. So that's one thing I'll tell you to get used to if you come through the academy and the Marine Corps or another service, the Army, whatever. The more elite you get, the more times you'll have been through this thing called an indoc, right? Where someone is literally screaming at you, "You're a turd, you're never going to make it." And you're like, well, this is the 12th time somebody's told me I'm not going to make it, right? And so one of the persistence and having the mental fortitude to pick yourself up out of the mud and keep moving is one of the single most important aspects of success in the military, particularly as you get into the more elite special operations units. The ability to just say, I'm never going to quit, no matter what you're going to do to me, no matter what you throw at me, no matter how tired I am, no matter how hungry I am, no matter how cold it is, that I'm not going to quit. That will get you further than anything you can imagine.
This episode is brought to you by PerformancePractic TV. All types of practitioners and patients who want to know more about natural healthcare love to subscribe to PerformancePractic TV. PPTV is a cost-effective, password-protected, online, extensive library of training videos for clinicians and staff, as well as general consumers looking for direction and solutions to help themselves that can be watched from anywhere on your favorite Wi-Fi device. Education and training include Dr. Jerome's 3D brain-body mapping exam and correction system. This involves identifying multidimensional asymmetries through a comprehensive approach. Once the imbalances are identified, extensive hours of various proven corrective methods are the focus, including the research, physiological mechanisms, along with hands-on instruction, including regenerative cold laser therapy, adjustments, soft tissue, when to use orthotics, pulsed electromagnetic frequency, whole body synchronous vibration, corrective clinical exercises for general consumers and competitors, as well as detailed nutrition and healthy eating to optimize your metabolism for healing or performance. Understanding the physiology and application of guaranteed healthy weight loss, muscle gain, and strength improvements for the look and quality of life outcomes you desire. In addition, there are numerous lab testing examples that apply to having more energy, hormone balance, immune enhancement, correcting digestion, brain health, understanding mechanisms and solutions to become pain-free, toes to nose, and discussing the limitless science and integrative protocols of anti-aging, including peptides, cell therapy, exosomes, and more. New content is added regularly. As long as you are subscribed, you continue to access all the materials. Subscribe today at watch.performancepractic.com. Without having a mentor, obviously they try to tear you down in the Naval Academy early on, but I would still think that when they see some potential in you, somebody probably pulls you aside a little bit, says, hey, I really see this in you, and you're still getting blasted as you go through it. But there is some insights that do kind of help you understand that process. And again, you had an advantage because, you were prepared for that with your family too, of encouragement and insider information that you just didn't get emotionally broken down on those things.
Yeah, it's going there in the military, whether it's your DI or your company commander or whatever, it's a very parochial relationship. They're like a father, right? On one hand, they got their hand on your shoulder doing, you just kicked ass, did a great job, I'm proud of you. And the other time it's the back of the hand going, you screwed up, get your head straight, right? And you'll get a lot of both of that. I mean, DIs are on the recruits, right? But every single person I know who's a Marine looks back on their DIs fondly because they had a huge role in making them into a successful member of the Marine Corps and society. And, even though it was hard at times, those people that are responsible for your growth as individuals, you generally look back upon pretty fondly.
Now, I'm going to let you do all talking. I'm going to tell you, obviously, there's a lot of verbal uses that the average civilian would not understand what those things are, like JSOC and some of these things. You have a very distinguished career as you jumped up there. So now that you're out of the Naval Academy, you got put into the pipeline into special operations as a Marine, and there's a long decorated history here of special forces, a commander in special forces, JSOC, CIA combatant. So there's a long list here, but just kind of take us through a starting point and explain that.
Yeah, so first I just set the sort of the ground level here for anybody who's kind of doesn't have that background. So within the Marine Corps, at the time I was commissioned, we weren't part of Special Operations Command, right? The Marine Corps had said, essentially, previous leadership of the Marine Corps had said, all Marines are Special Operations. We don't need to participate in your Special Operations Command. So though we behaved and we would deploy units that were considered by the Department of Defense special operations capable, so we'd go out with a Marine Expeditionary Unit, we would qualify on every single special operations mission and we'd be able to conduct them. We weren't part of Special Operations Command. So I was commissioned as a ground intelligence officer, and that is sort of the Marine Corps' lead MOS for the special operations world now, because after about 2006, 2007, we actually became part of Special Operations Command. I'll talk more about that later. But at the time, the ground intel officer, you're an infantry officer, so you go through all the infantry training, you go through all the intel training, you go through a whole bunch of special training, whether it's Scout Sniper Platoon Commander's Course, the Scout Sniper Basic Course, Amphibious Reconnaissance School, all those things that kind of essentially make you capable of all these special operations mission profiles, airborne, diving, sniping, all those types of close quarters battle, all those types of things that give you those special operations skill set. And other organizations, the Army, the Navy with BUDS, they had very defined pipelines for that at the time. The Marine Corps was much more piecemeal in the early 2000s. Now, with the advent of a true component, MARSOC, the Raiders, true component of Special Operations Command, we have a very, much like BUDS, we've got a very defined pipeline where you go through, you do all the physical training, you do the critical MOS training, you do your dive, you do your airborne, but it was much more piecemeal at the time when I was there. You kind of had to work your way in there. So I went through IOC, so Infantry Officers Course is the first thing you do after graduating TBS. Pretty brutal. Starts out with an in-doc that can last anywhere from a day to a couple days. My advice to anyone, get used to going long distances with very heavy weights as fast as you can. That is the name of any sort of greenside infantry, reconnaissance, any sort of those types of whether basic infantry or more advanced stuff. But you think it's bad in training when you got 80 or 90 pounds on your back. When you get to combat, my ruck on our first mission, which was a deep 90-day deep reconnaissance patrol through much of like Helmand, Uruzgan, Zabul province, Kandahar, all that area in kind of southern Afghanistan, weighed 150 pounds when we went out the door. I mean, water, ammunition, batteries. I mean, it was brutal. Literally, in my case, back-breaking work. So you went through IOC that last 3 months. You went on to the Platoon Commander's Course, the Scout Sniper Platoon Commander's Course. I was fortunate enough to go through the Martial Arts Instructor Course. Then 3-4 months of Intel School at Dam Neck, which is right across the street from where SEAL Team 6 is. So we got to do some cross-training with those guys. And so it ends up being about a year and a half of training. You get a little vacation, and Jerome, I literally reported to my first unit to take command of a platoon, or in my case, be a deputy intel officer while I was waiting on a unit to get back before I took over a platoon. I checked in on September 11th. I was standing in Alphas, meeting the regimental commander, shaking his hand when planes started flying into the World Trade Center. And I mean, you want to talk about like a wake up. I just finished 5.5 years of training between the Naval Academy and the Marine Corps training pipeline for ground intel. I'm picking up at 6th Marine Regiment as the deputy intel officer for the next 6 months until I pick up my sniper platoon. And I'm standing there as the planes are flying into the World Trade Center. And the next thing you know, we're getting a warning order to be prepared to secure FEMA Region 4, I think it was, which was the national capital. Because we're in the Marine Corps, we're sort of exempt from sort of some of the posse comitatus requirements, and we can do other such activities as the president directs, which is why the Marines were just recently sent to LA to kind of help put down those riots. They told us, we didn't know what was going on. We just know planes are flying into the Pentagon, the World Trade, they're on their way to the White House. They called us up and said, get ready to go take over Washington, D.C. in case we're under enemy attack. And so my first day on the job, my first day on the job, we were rolling out like Rand McNally atlases of Washington, D.C. and figuring out what bridges we needed to secure, where the mosques were, in case, how to control the lines of communication in and out of the city, what places we use for population evacuations, Redskins Stadium here, the soccer stadium there. And it was almost 180 degrees out from what I expected, right? Never once in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be playing the part of a Confederate general, invading D.C. So that was my first day in the fleet as a Marine officer.
So how old were you when you graduated the Naval Academy, and then take us to that first day, September 11th? What's the ages at the end and at the start?
Yeah, so my birthday's April 16th, so I had just turned 22 when we graduated, I think end of May 23rd, May 25th, something like that. So I was 22 and a month when I got commissioned. So I was 23 and a half years old. I was 23 when I got put in charge of helping plan to secure Washington, D.C.
So all that other further elite training took a year and a half approximately, prior to that?
Yeah, roughly. Yep.
Okay. Now, not to fast forward, that's quite an intro to getting into the elite commanding ranks that we're going to start building on with your aspects. But here again, you ended up being a sniper, and as a captain in the Marines, you're a sniper, and you're also seeing duties where you are leading Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, Rangers, all these things. So I want to be careful what words we use here, because for the military folks. So when I was a lieutenant, I commanded a sniper platoon. I was fortunate enough I got to go through the Scout Sniper Basic course, and we went to Afghanistan as part of the 22nd MEU. And for those that are interested in that, Lieutenant Colonel Assad Khan, you can find him on YouTube. He has a great 4-part series about our battles in Afghanistan, because at the time we were the longest distance and duration ever deployed Marine expeditionary unit, special operations capable. We went more than 1,000 miles inland and fought up to 11,000 feet above sea level as a reinforced battalion in the Marine Corps, which is this. So they had an Army division try and fight in the area that we were in after we left, and after a week they quit and moved out to a different area because it was just incredibly inhospitable. And that speaks to the mental and the physical training we did with our Marines prior to getting there to get them acclimated to altitude and endurance and everything, and the mental fortitude of particularly the staff NCOs and officers that had to lead folks through that. So I commanded the Scout Sniper Platoon and was part of what we call the Maritime Special Purpose Force, which was, remember I was saying how our special operations units were separate from Special Operations Command back then. So we trained our own units up to be able to do raids and direct action and things like that, urban reconnaissance. And so, we did all those sorts of things.
in Afghanistan. Predominantly what we did with my guys, the reconnaissance and the force reconnaissance platoon, which were sort of the special operations elements of the Marine Corps at that time, we did deep reconnaissance. Wherever our ground elements were, a rifle company, the battalion as a whole, a platoon, we'd be out anywhere from miles to dozens of miles in front of them, trying to identify where the enemy is at. And then we bring that whole big unit in to fix and finish them. So find, fix, and finish was sort of our model. Our job was to find them, keep eyes on them, figure out how many there are. Then we'd maneuver a unit capable of destroying them into place. And we, particularly when the assault would take off, we'd be able to control things like mortars or aircraft to keep them pinned in place. Well, that big maneuver element was able to maneuver on them and destroy them. So that's what we did for, I think we got extended a couple times. So I think that's generally what we did for our first, 6-8 months or so in Afghanistan the first time I was there.
So a lot of things that we covered already. There's a lot of elite selection processes that you've went through up to this point. Where does sniper school fit into there? I mean, there's a lot of people that would love to achieve that status of a sniper. Now it's elite just to get to special forces in general, but even the percentage of special forces that even you got to be kind of chosen in order to go to sniper school, and kind of even mentioned through that process.
Yep.
And where did that occur through for you through post Naval Academy? And was that still after you were in that leadership role on September 11th? Did you go to sniper school before that, or it was after that?
Yeah. So I was in that role on September 11th for about 6 months until the unit I was eventually slated for came back from deployment. They were deployed, and then sort of the next batch of people go in and get ready for the next deployment. So, and I went to sniper school during that period. It was sort of the 9/11 period. I was very lucky. Very few officers get to go through the basic course. Not that it's the biggest reason being the time. It's 10, 12 weeks long. It's varied a little bit over the years, but you're talking 3 months away from your command duties, which is a pretty tough thing to do as an officer. I was lucky. Again, I guess the academic side shined here because we had a lot of units deployed, and I was trying on a very compressed time period to get my unit ready to deploy because the war was starting to pick up at that point, right? So this is at this point, fast forward to late 2002. So we're getting hot and heavy in Afghanistan. We're getting ready. The talk about going in Iraq is happening. So we're getting the war machine's turning here. And so I went to the G3, G3 plans and training, who was responsible for all the training. And I said, "Sir, I've got a great idea." And I'm sure a colonel and a lieutenant, I look back at it now and I can't believe I had the balls to do some of these things. But I just roll up to, "Sir, I got a great idea. What I want to do? Since we got school slots, we're low on units here. I want to take my entire platoon through sniper school at the same time and use all our SOPs for the MU, standard operating procedures for our platoon, the battalion, and the MU, all use them through sniper school. I think it'd be the greatest way to train the biggest number of people to the highest level in the shortest amount of time." And he's like, "That's a great idea. Why didn't I ever think of it?" And he authorized it. And so by the time I got back to the battalion commander's like, "Wes, get in my office." And I come in there and he's like, "What are you doing up at G3's office?" And I pitched him on an idea. He goes, "It's like, the only reason I'm not coming across my desk at you right now is because he thinks it's a great idea. So get out of here and go do your..." So, I was lucky enough to be able to go with them. And we did literally platoon level training at sniper school to some extent when it was previously truly like an individual effort course or maybe pairs, right? So worked out really, really well for me. Again, it's one of those things, you got to be selected. You run an in-doc in the platoon, so everybody in the battalion comes out that wants to be a sniper. You put them through a grueling 1 week or 2 week in-doc course. You take maybe 20 guys, then you put them in like what you call like a PIG platoon. PIG stands for professionally instructed gunman. When you're a sniper, you're considered a hog, a hunter of gunmen. And so you run them through that, and maybe that weeds out, half of the rest of them. And then, then you send them to sniper school, and there's about a 50 to 70% attrition rate. It varies from class to class and over the years based on how they change training, but, an incredibly high attrition rate, both physically and mentally, from things like precision shooting, and orders writing and things of that nature.
So what advice would you give people, again, because being a sniper, there's going to be, I don't want to oversimplify it and say there's going to be a lot of math. I mean, it's way more than just that. But I mean, coming up through that, I mean, people that really have that heart pounding and that drive and focus, and maybe again, you know, they didn't hit the lottery with academics, so they are going to have to work harder in that aspect, you know, tutors and those types of things. But so what kind of classes would you say would prepare them, even starting as early as high school, for those things?
They'll teach you how to shoot. The Marine Corps is pretty known for teaching you how to shoot. So I was lucky. I grew up hunting. I've always been able to shoot fairly well. My brother was also a sniper. You know, he was a sniper in the Marine Corps. So we had our dad was a Marine. We were fairly well instructed on that. But they'll teach you how to shoot. Stalking is hard. Being able to move around the woods clandestinely and get yourself in a concealed position where the bad guys can't see you when they're actively looking for you. Stalking gets a lot of people. So to the extent that you can get really comfortable on your hands and knees or on your belly in the woods and all the things that go with it, there are times, you know, you might accidentally crawl over a fire ant nest and now you got fire ants in your ghillie suit, and all you want to do is roll around on the ground and kill them all, but you just got to sit there and get bit by fire ants until you get out of the area. Or you might run into a rattlesnake or a water moccasin, and the ability to mentally control yourself when you come over a log and there's a copperhead looking at you from a couple feet away and not freak out. I pull those examples because those have actually happened to me. And so the ability to have the mental discipline to deal with adversity and not overreact or not make an emotional or poor decision. And sometimes you may only have a few seconds to make those decisions, right? That's probably the best advice. And again, you know, it's long distances, heavyweight. I think I went from about 250 to like 205 at sniper school. You don't sleep for days. You don't eat for days sometimes. You know, the ability to deal with all that misery. It's hot, at least in the sniper school on the West Coast in Pendleton. You got a lot of elevation changes, which suck. In Camp Lejeune, it might as well be a jungle. It's hot. So, you know, it just depends. Every base has their own sort of hell that you got to endure.
Now, with sniper school, and I think up to this point, I've done a pretty good job of taking us through chronological order. I'm really going to let you take over from here in terms of, you know, the rest of your military career achievements, up until we kind of start talking about some of the injuries and sustaining things. But let's have you just keep taking us through that chronological order.
Yep. So we got back from Afghanistan. The 22nd Marine Expeditionary came back, and, you know, I'd spent roughly 3 years plus in Camp Lejeune. And so it was time for me to what's called a PCS, a permanent change of station. And so I had in-docked and was planning to go to Force Recon, which was our sort of high-level special operations unit at the time. And I got a phone call that, hey, we're doing this new thing, and we got this organization called MARDAT 1 out on the West Coast because we're going to join Special Operations Command. And so we're not really fielding any more force units right now because all those units are going to be rolled into MARSOC like in the next year or two. But, you know, we kind of got you pegged, and we want to send you somewhere where you're going to get the absolutely most special operations exposure, and then you're going to bring it back and to this new MARSOC unit in 2.5, 3 years. So I'm like, okay, that sounds like a good deal to me. It's exactly what I want to do. So they sent me up to an organization within the National Security Agency. So for those who don't know, you've got the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the National Security Agency, the CIA, and there's all sorts of peripheral intelligence organizations that are part of sort of the National Intelligence Administration, right? And NSA is predominantly concerned with signals intelligence, right? So collecting signals and protecting people from collecting our information. So I'm like, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do up there, but okay, you send me up there, that's great. Well, when I get up there, I really come to learn that in the modern highest echelons of special operations, signals intel plays a huge component because we're targeting a lot of people off their signals admissions, whether it's phones, cell phones, push to talk walkies, right? That's something we can collect on very readily and get very defined targeting information. So, at Delta Force or SEAL Team 6, that is a huge component of their targeting. Maybe 75, 80% of their targets are based largely off that. So I went up there and I did several different deployments. I did one, I was what was called the NIST commander. So I ran the National Intelligence Support Team for Delta Force. So I went in and I was the senior NSA guy there for Delta, and then a Joint Interagency Task Force concerned with finding bin Laden. And that was one component of the component. We were hunting all the high value targets in Iraq. So I was integrated in with the Delta command infrastructure and ran probably the targeting of 75, 80% of the guys that we were going out of after every night. So when you said earlier, I know I was attached to them. I worked very closely with them. I was actually there until about a day before we killed Abu Musab al-Zarqawi. I was part of the guys that figured out how to hunt him down. And I was like literally jumping on a plane when we sort of started the pursuit that eventually ended up on a bomb being dropped on him in Bakuba. So it was a wonderful experience there. Then I came back and I did another deployment with both the CIA and JSOC into Afghanistan and other countries in that area that we may or may not have been in. And that was really chasing after, bin Laden and the remnants of very, very high-level Taliban, the Haqqani terrorist network. There's some of these organizations that you may have heard of over the years that either were training or facilitating the movement of terrorists, to places where they could stage to attack the U.S. or, were guys that were building bombs in Waziristan. So we're the ones that chased down all those guys across borders and everything. And I did basically tactical signals intelligence. There's some places where you can't get maybe in really steep mountains, you can't get a satellite to look in there. The wind shear is too bad for a predator to fly over. And so a team of SEALs and a guy like me has to hike 10 miles to point a directional parabolic mic at some place to hear what's going on, or to be able to place a device that might be able to pick up signals in that area. So I did that for quite a while and worked with a lot of the same guys between JSOC. And so coming out of that, I was coming back and I got orders to Marine Special Operations Command. So we stood up in the time that I was running around Afghanistan and Iraq with JSOC and NSA and the CIA. We stood that up. I was going to go be the XO for Hotel Company, which is the second company that was going to be stood up of, I think we're up to 5 or 6 companies that have been stood up now. And I'd also been asked to indoc, the guys from JSOC liked me well enough that they said, hey, why don't you come try out for the team, right? So I was planning to go to an indoc for JSOC, had orders for a couple months down the road to MARSOC. And at this point, I've been pretty banged up. I've had a couple shoulder surgeries, 2 or 3 shoulder surgeries at this point, and I've had some injuries, kind of standard wear and tear kind of stuff. And so I was doing some jumps, getting my jump quals back up because, at any of those units, you're going to jump quite a bit. And I'm what's called a heavy drop. So 6'3", 250 pounds, 100 pounds of equipment in a parachute that was designed for a 5'6", 140-pound paratrooper from World War II. So you sink pretty quick relative to some of the other guys. And I jumped out of the door. I had what's called a twist when your parachute gets kind of twisted up in the jet stream or the jet wash. And I cleared my twist. I looked down. I'm like, I'm a lot closer to the ground than I should be. I look up and I see that I'm not streaming, but I got a tear. You have a hole in the center of your chute that kind of guides the air up. And it had torn along one of the panels. So I was letting out a lot more air. And I didn't really feel like I had time to pull a reserve. So I just tried to pull a slip and kind of land as gently as I could, but it did not work. And I hit the ground, I don't know, I'm guessing 35, 40 miles per hour, feet first. And then you basically just sat down right on my ass at 30 miles an hour and fractured my L2, L3, L4, compression fractures of all of them. I didn't know at the time. I got up and walked away from it. I mean, my head was ringing. I may have had a slight concussion too, but packed my chute. That was Friday, one of our last jumps. got home, had a couple of pops, went to bed, got up in the middle of the night to pee, and I fell over just in pain because the perineal nerve had swollen up or had been compressed from the swelling of my spinal cord. And I'm like, I got to go to the hospital. And they're like, did you get a car accident? I'm like, no, I had a bad jump. And they're like, well, yeah, you have a compression fracture all up and down your lower, your whole lumbar region. So that, caused quite a bit of problems for me. And so, at that point, I'd accomplished a lot of what I wanted to do. Because of the injuries and some other things, it didn't look like I was going to make the timeline for those either the in-doc or going over. Remember, they're just standing up MARSOC, so they needed someone like right away. And JSOC's kind of, it's an operational tempo thing for them. They're always deployed and stuff. So it was kind of time to look for something else and started kind of working and rehabbing my body. At that point, I got done like really 3 solid big deployments and a couple other stints like in Africa and other places when I got sent on a mission to, for a couple weeks or a month to do something very particular. So I'd kind of really done everything I wanted. So that's when I really got into the medical side of things, and not only for myself, but also as a career, because I went to Johns Hopkins and finished up an MBA there, and then really started a career in medical device, and also started a path of trying to rehab my body, because at that point I'd been up to several surgeries on my shoulders and back and everything else, and kind of the wear and tear of at that point between active duty and the Naval Academy, almost a dozen years of real sort of brutal physical training, which takes its toll.
Yeah, I mean, it takes its toll on the physical part of it and the mental part of it. So probably best case scenario that you kind of took the leadership role on that for yourself too, going into a medical program, kind of learning how you can navigate yourself. Because if you get lost into that system, you can really get pushed around doctor hopping, get less answers than real answers, more frustration, more mental taxing. Do you feel like it was a pretty fortunate process for you, even with that severe of injury that ended your military career and now starting in this route? Did you feel like you took a pretty good route, or this is where we're really going to be not shifting gears, but that integration of you go through that level of elite training, even if you don't go into special forces, whether it's just regular military or just an extended athletic career, which obviously you have to even go into the timeline we just followed up with you. So injuries are going to be a part of it. You want to minimize them, but there's going to be some.
It does, and I don't know that I consciously made the decision at the time to do that. I was on the East Coast. It was one of the best schools in the country. I got in there. I think that was more of my thought process at the time. But I will tell you, having worked on the business side of medicine and also been in I started out as a sales rep in medical device. So I've been in thousands of surgeries, orthopedic, ENT, all sorts of different ones. So I know the system inside and out. I know some of the best doctors in the country, and that was absolutely critical because, as we'll talk about, I've had 4 shoulder surgeries, right? I've had multiple procedures on my back. I've had surgery on my back, and I had this kind of rare thing called piriformis syndrome, which was misdiagnosed, and I just knew intrinsically based on my symptoms, my knowledge of my body, and my understanding of everything. I knew I was being misdiagnosed, and knowing the system and being so engaged with myself, training, all the things that we can talk about. Like when I said, bullshit, these doctors are wrong. And, doctors don't like being told they're wrong very, very often by someone who isn't a doctor, but I'm not afraid to advocate for my own health. And I'd advise anyone that, you can do it respectfully, but get a second opinion, get a third opinion. I went to 7 doctors, and the last 2 before I found the one who fixed my piriformis syndrome, one thought I had Lou Gehrig's disease, and one canceled the surgery because my blood work came back and they thought I had cancer, right? So, and then I finally found a doctor and I told him everything, and he's like, I know what's the matter, piriformis syndrome, I'm a specialist in this. And that's what I thought I'd had all along. And I had 7 doctors tell me I was wrong. And then this guy did surgery on me, and I walked out of the OR feeling better than I had in 2 years. And it was only because I didn't give up, and only because I was academically so in tune with what was going on with my body and, the various potential disease states, that I could have a solid discussion with the doctors.
Yeah, myself, obviously very different history, but still the motivation that leads me to do what I do today was myself personally, the level of training that was done in strength sports, the people that I met, elite coaches in the strength and fitness industry, elite lifters. You learn so much going through that. Every day you get tested, and ultimately you want to prevent injuries. So not having people shoot at me and, the type of rigorous trainings that you did, but at all times when you're pushing the body to levels that only you have to train the mind to go past to achieve these physical things, you know what is possible, but you just don't think about it. I mean, you can't think about it. You just got to prepare yourself, have the confidence. So I had a very unique experience in chiropractic that really showed me, like in traditional healthcare that did not exist, very high skill level. And then, of course, the nutrition and the training, getting to be around so many national champions, world champions, meeting people like Louis Simmons, who, really transformed even the strength and fitness industry. But even because of his own injuries, he not only heavily influenced the strength and fitness industry, but even the rehab industry of different things that he came. So that's really, and he's not alone. There's so many people, too long a list to mention with that thing. But that's where the real magic happens. And I think people that have been through that process, you kind of hold a unique superpower even to really be able to understand, what top-notch surgeons in traditional surgery looks like, but yet the prevention work, the prep work, we always really prepare people if they do have to have surgery. We make them very highly conditioned. I feel best in the nation, even best in the world of the surgical results of the few people we do lose to surgery. I mean, most of my practice is supposedly incurable people with visceral diseases, have been through the gamut, as well as physical pain. And we have a very system approach to that. It's a very methodical but open-minded system approach where we really look at the fingerprint to the person, and we're looking for anomalies, but we're also not missing the part that the basics fix the most amount of people, and kind of taking that strength and conditioning approach. We can't go to level 2 until you achieve level 1. And you can do that in a very fast time if you pass our scoring system, but ultimately when we reach those certain areas, and it's a very comprehensive brain-body, 3-dimensional analysis of structure, metabolism, neurology, mental, emotional patterns, all those things.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you hit the nail on the head, and to sort of even maybe simplify it more for like the general audience, you got MDs and you got DOs, right? So you got a medical doctor, you got a doctor of osteopathy, and the difference is the DO integrates more kind of holistic things. They're going to look at chiropractic. They're going to look at holistic medicine. And I made a living selling and working on the invention of medical surgical devices. So I'm very pro-surgery. It's the only way to fit. If you tear a ligament and it's not attached to the bone anymore, there's only one way to do it. You got to go in and you got to fixate it and anchor it and do different things, right? But so many people have a 70% of things could be treated without surgery if people would do things preventatively, if they would take a more holistic approach to things. And when you're shopping for a doctor or getting a second opinion, what I have found is whatever specialty they are a hammer in search of a nail. If you got a problem going on up here and you see an ENT, he's going to be, oh, it's your sinuses, it's your osteums, it's this, it's that. If it's going up here and you see a brain guy, he's going to be like, oh, well, I found a little, tiny blimp on your CT scan and your rear lobe or whatever, right? And if you see an orthopod, he's going to look for an orthopedic problem. And that's this problem I ran into. I'd seen a bunch of orthopods, and I finally got to the right, more nerve-oriented guy, and he saw the right problem. But if you can find a doctor I'm going to look orthopedically, I'm going to look at the nerves, I'm going to look at, these 3, 4, 5 systems, and give you a more integrative approach, you're going to be healthier. And when it comes to, what you do, which is really preparing people to maximize their potential, right? That more integrative approach, because it's like anything. If you got 5 or 6 key things, if you're missing one or you're missing 2 of them, you're not going to operate. It's like, hey, your truck, it's got a full tank of gas. If it doesn't have oil in it, it's not going anywhere, right? If it doesn't have coolant in it, it's not going anywhere. You miss any one of those big things for a system, it's not going to work right.
Yeah, and one of the things that I always stress in teaching in the seminars, there's approximately 35 different symptoms and diseases out there. There's 12 traditional systems in the body, and it's like you got to learn the systems, not how these things are just an elbow problem, but how can a chronic elbow problem relate to the spinal structure, the soft tissue, the neurology, and of course the function. It's not just in a textbook. I think people that have a high athletic career, whether the list is long. Of course, whether it's gymnastics, ballet, wrestling, where you have to go through a progression, and it really is, elite strength lifting. You're not going to just be the greatest athlete, just being the strongest person out there, but what it tests you in any of the elite strength sports is you will learn neuromechanobiology better than all the others. It's not as much open skilled as football and wrestling and those types of things. But what it is your body will explode if you do not have it very well tuned besides just what you're working with. Like you could be the world's greatest squatter, but if you've got imbalances in other parts of the body, it's a matter of time before that building explodes on you. And you need to do some of these accessory works to protect that primary. Yep. And that's strength and flexibility, not just what or the other. So I do think, and I stress so much as we're talking about the preparations, even though so many people look at the awe-inspiring physical capabilities it takes to do special forces, but there's an incredible mental capability to it. And in anything, you want those complements. But even being a clinician, no matter what your license is, it's the same body. I could care less what your licensure is. If you stick within just the specialty and the licensure of what you are educated on, you're going to miss a ton of things. And this is why the New England Journal of Medicine writes an article every year saying out of all the diagnoses in the world, 73% of them are wrong. And it's because there's so many specialists out there that don't have that background on really take it a step back, go, this is what I'm great at, this is what I'm world class at, but here is the weakest link that I'm seeing. But to take a step back and really go, well, this is also influencing at the very least. And sometimes, even though you're a specialist in a certain area, it's like, well, yeah, that's there, but it is not truly the major cause of the problem. And I have a big philosophy on the strength of the organism. Even, when somebody ruptures their quad, it's like, well, then hit a PR and pull-ups. And that's oversimplifying it by far, but people heal so fast when you're really looking at the body multidimensional and its strength of the organism from the 12 traditional systems. And then you can't even ignore the fascial system, which is the largest system in the body, and the meridian system that's been documented for thousands of years as well. So you don't have to know everything about all those things, but having some good ideas, and of course having experiences in life where you reached a wall that you had to figure out yourself. The specialists and the clinicians didn't do it for you. Once you can think three-dimensionally like that, you will be a better clinician. And the only way I know ultimately how I see that is clinicians that were athletes and they really looked at it from a very comprehensive standpoint. I think strength coaches would make the best clinicians ever because they don't just teach people how to squat. Most of them, even if you say I'm primarily a speed coach, they know a lot of things. Those elite coaches out there, and there's thousands of elite strength and conditioning coaches, and not saying they're all going to stop and go off to any particular med school, but how they look at the body, if you did teach them those schools of a medical practitioner, especially when you start looking, truly most people don't know how large the library of chiropractic is, and there's 206 bones in the body, and you can get stuck in a technique, but you should learn how to adjust all 206 bones in every axis and every position you could stick the body in, and not just the techniques that they have. And then you start looking at soft tissue, strength and conditioning, range of motion, and that's the stuff that really drives me and some of the impressions we want to make on people. And again, having people like you come on here from a different perspective, but you're living it as well, in these different ranges. So I think this is really great as far as people getting that tell, especially the career that you have now and how you've rehabbed yourself. So even with this, I mean, you know the brotherhood of the military. Some people have injuries that can be rehabbed, whether it's mental or physical. Some people come out with much more severities. For yourself, let's start there. a lot was done right, and part of that was done just because of your ability to three-dimensional think and your experience coming through it, and then your academic career even after the military. So what has changed even since you've gone through some of your traumas, because you're really involved in the medical side of things, and you see the progressions and improvements, and maybe not jumping there yet. Like you and I did talk about like some of the anti-aging things, and we'll get into that here pretty soon too. But here again, your unique experience.
Yeah, I think because I mean, I've literally seen it from the outside and from the inside. I've been in the surgeries and seen the techniques that are being performed, and I've also experienced them myself. And it's kind of interesting because I had a left shoulder surgery and a right shoulder surgery in my 20s, and then a left shoulder surgery and a right shoulder surgery in my 40s. So, a 20-year difference, kind of like changing tires on a car. They always seem to wear out at the same rate on me. But the techniques that were done, and the type of recovery, the type of physical therapy afterwards, and even in the last one, take the last shoulder surgery, 2 years apart. I did my right shoulder first, and the doctor was sort of less aggressive. The doctor I saw that time was a little less aggressive on the physical therapy, little less aggressive on some of the grafting, some of the grafts they have now that will help promote growth and everything. And that physical therapy, it took me 9-10 months to get back to 100%. Then, so I said, I'm going to see a different doctor when it was time for my left shoulder. And the exact same suite of surgical surgeries performed. He's like, look, I look at you like a pro athlete, and kind of that mentality you're talking about. He's a Baylor sports med guy. He does all the pitchers here in Houston, does a lot of the NBA guys, football players. He's one of the best shoulder guys in the country. And so he said, I'm going to put you on the exact same program that I would want one of these guys that's trying to get back, before the Super Bowl to be on or whatever. And my arm was feeling great in 3 or 4 months. And so the difference in sort of that aggressive treatment and, very aggressive post-operative rehabilitation, it's really pushing. It was painful a lot of days, but I recovered 50, 60% faster. He also did some tissue grafting stuff on there. I can't remember the name of the product off the top of my head, but just some of those things that promote healing, reduce scar tissue, things of that nature. We keep improving those things. One of the problems, though, for that second one, and I had the VA pay for all my surgeries, even though I've had some in the VA hospital. I've done some through community care where I'm out, but hey, to me, it's their fault. They can pick up the bill at my Blue Cross or whatever. But because I have a fairly good understanding, I literally walked in for my last shoulder surgery with a stack of journal articles about supplemental growth hormone treatment post-operatively, decreasing, time to, full recovery and everything. And I plopped them down, and it's a teaching hospital, say like a third-year resident there, and I'm throwing down a resident. I'm like, I want a script for growth hormone, post-surgery. And he's like, and I'm like, I brought you 15, I brought you 15 journal articles that all show it's positive, including the NBA had just done one in knees because they got a multi-million-dollar investment to get an athlete back just a couple games, a couple months sooner, right? And so they did one, and it showed like 30% decrease in recovery time with growth hormone supplementation post-operatively. And I'm like, that's what I want. And, the VA is ill prepared for that. The resident's like, well, let me go get the attending kind of thing. And, and I ended up getting in this back and forth. Orthopedic feels, well, we'll do it if the endocrinologist will prescribe it. And the endocrinologist is like, well, it's an orthopedic procedure. So, I fought back and forth with them and then just said, screw it, I'll do it myself. And, got with someone like you and got scripted for it on my own and everything to supplement it post-operatively. And I guarantee, that arm recovered twice as fast as the other arm. It'd be stupid to not assume that had something to do with it. I mean,
20 years late, and you were 20 years.
Yeah, and 20 years later, and
20
it recovered
years of hard miles later.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where things really are. it's not there in the standard medical procedures. It's not. That even in the natural healthcare world, I do know people that have natural healthcare clinics that are very integrated, and it's the natural healthcare practitioner that runs the show and the medical doctors work for them. And I do see that much more proactively with it, and it's not a tug of war. But those are exceptions, and you just have to have connections in order to find those things. And that's some of the things that we always try to align ourselves, even if some of the things aren't done under our roof. But that's exactly where we collected. You know, I've invested, I'm not a part owner of a stem cell clinic, but, you know, I've had stem cells a number of times. I had a torn ACL when I was 14. Ended up having the surgery years later and many re-injuries in between. Just wanted to put off the surgery, which wasn't necessarily a smart thing either. But I also came back way too aggressively with my right knee, so it became really inflexible, and that's what kind of led me. There wasn't just enough stretching, strengthening, enough proper clinical exercise and rehab to do at that point. So I was always interested in stem cells, but that really put my application out there. And I've tried a number of different stem cells because I do have a lot of connections. And so I always was getting the best stem cells from the best people that I trusted at the time. But there's a stair step to some of those things. And ultimately now I led myself to VitaCell Biological Global, where they use Wharton's jelly stem cells only. And I can honestly say, you know, with one injection of Wharton's jelly stem cells from VitaCell Global, I got more out of that than I did the 7 or 8 stem cell injections prior to it, even though all of them did help and progress. And then there was a earlier year, I can't believe I didn't like tear my patella tendon one time. It felt like somebody shot me with a 22 in my knee. And I even got it checked out. Ed was like, God, something had to tear in there. Like it was not good, but it was still working. And years later, when I wasn't doing something, I was walking down a hill and I slipped and my quad just exploded and let go just from that. And I'm not the most flexible guy in the world, and my leg is literally behind my body. I thought I just tore every ligament. I didn't really know what happened. It was such a surprise. I just thought I tore every ligament in my knee just from the slip and this and that. So you just grab the leg and shove it in place before the reality sets in and any swelling. But then about 30 minutes later, you know, the quad draws up and your kneecap is sticking up, you know, this much. So at that time already, I had stem cells circulating through my body, and went to Athens Orthopedic, did a great job. It was pretty spontaneous. It was right at the beginning of COVID, so the hospitals were, nobody was there. They didn't shut them down yet. But so I got right in. And but this time too, just being smarter. So I'm probably almost 50 at this time. And I don't even think of my left leg is where the quad tear was. I don't even think about it or feel it. And I had my first post-appointment with the surgeon 6 weeks later, and I never really had pain after the surgery, never really used meds. I took half the meds they prescribed the first day. I just didn't want that deep bone pain. You know, immediately we started doing Erconia laser even at the time, you know, because Dr. Rodrigo Nera proved, he's a plastic surgeon, so he proved in his research studies if you pre-laser to surgery with the Erconia laser, like it is night and day differences of post-surgical healing in the acute phase. So everybody kind of thinks it's like, oh yeah, lasers are so legitimized now for mitochondria and energy and tissue regeneration. But Dr. Rodrigo was the one who, again, he's a surgeon and super great creative guy, just goes way outside the textbooks. And he clearly proved that if you pre-laser to any type of surgery, it is so night and day, the pain, the medication, the scar revision, the recovery that people have. Even if you immediately post laser, you will never get back that immediate acute healing phase quickness. So immediately, we've done that for decades on people prior to my injury with this. And then of course, post laser, you could post PEMF and immediately stretching, strengthening. And like I said, you're incapacitated on the lower body with an injury like that. But I just put more effort into my upper body, you know, and I always eat pretty clean. But it was really strength of the organism, not just the quad tear. So my first follow-up with the orthopedic surgeon was 6 weeks later. And I never really had to use crutches. I mean, of course, I had a brace and just kind of limped around the house for the first couple of days. But by the time 6 weeks, I had a normal gait. I mean, I couldn't squat normal, but I had a normal gait. You couldn't even tell I had surgery. So I'm in the office of the surgeon, and he walks in and he's just confused. You know, he's looking at the chart and he's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "Are you a twin? Is this a joke?"
Because no, this is the 26th week post surgery appointment you should be at, right?
This is 6 weeks later. Yeah. He goes, and he's a really nice guy. But he's like, "Is this a joke?" Like, he goes, "This." Like, he's looking at the range of motion. I'm sitting there, my leg's 90 degrees. He tells me to walk and, you know, stand on one leg, just all these things. And I go, "No," I go, "Here's your scar right here. I know you can barely see it." I go, "I just got a lot cooler rehab tools than you guys have here. You know, we just do these things commonly in our office." But he was like, "Holy cow." He's like, "You're past 6 months where I would hope you would be in just 6 weeks." And it's not one silver bullet, even though, you know, the laser in that particular situation, and like I said, the PEMF, it was profound in that type of healing, but it's the work I always did, taking care of my body, maintaining the good nutrition and the exercise that we did. I mean, even once I tore my quad, you know, we stand on an item called the slack block. And at that time I was doing a fair amount of one-legged squats before the injury and slack block. So even the day before, or the day it happened, I was still standing on a slack block. I just took a powerlifting wrap and wrapped my knee, and I would just stand, you know, the recommended 2 minutes on a slack block. And it's just like preparing for the surgery, keeping that thing as strong and neurologically integrated prior to the surgery. And those are things that we do want to share, these experiences like you are and myself living through it. But you know,
here's a quick and easy experiment people can do at home. So I kind of stumbled upon this by accident because I was, you know, super busy one time, like, you know, we're in a move or whatever, and I just did another one, which is what reminds me of it. But, you know, you get busy and just like eating pizza because you haven't got your kitchen set up yet, and eating crappy and not working out, not getting enough sleep for like a 2-week period. And I noticed that my hair was not growing nearly as fast. And then I sort of measured it and figured out sort of the growth rate. And then like 2 weeks of like great sleep, great diet, perfect supplementation, and my hair grows like twice as fast. If your hair is growing like that, the rest of your cellular structure in your body is reacting the same way. So you can literally, I was doubling the sort of regeneration and growth in my body through proper exercise, proper diet, proper sleep, proper supplementation. And it's easily demonstrable, right? So like that's something people can figure out on their own really quickly. And when you see it firsthand, like, oh my, like you did with your quad, it's like, wow. And that's just a simple, easy one to do. Like, I'm going on vacation, I'm going to drink and stay up late and figure out, well, God, my hair didn't grow at all. And then I'm going to go home and eat right. And you can sort of do a sort of natural experiment, so to speak, on it without having to really change things.
Yeah, we do. We love data analytics and things that aren't in the textbook either. Like I said, those are little clinical pearls without a doubt. So even yourself, like how are you training now? Obviously you've had some injuries, but great point. At age 40, even with all the miles on you, you know, better recovery, probably less post symptoms, but once you have a weak link, there's certain things you just can't let that weak link rest. Like it's going to degenerate faster than the rest of your body. You just got to keep at it.
Yeah, you know, I'm just on the left side. I'll be 48 on my next birthday, so I'm just on the left side of 50. And, you know, the way I'm training now, obviously I'm not going for PRs on bench press and squat and deadlift anymore. I think, I hit 450 on bench before, and I don't think I'll ever get back to it, after 4 shoulder surgeries. But what I have done is really focus on technique, right? Because when you're young and you're just ripping weight around, explosive power and speed, that does tend to lend itself towards injury. So I'll focus a lot more on proper technique, not the cheating and the swinging and swaying and that kind of stuff. Really focus on technique. I seem to get very good results from that, good increases in strength at lower weight. Maybe not as much explosive power, but definitely look, feel, health, all that kind of stuff. The other thing, and I think you alluded this to, my weak areas. So shoulders, lower back, right? Those are, and then left leg where I've had, my piriformis, gluteal insertion, hamstring insertion point, that kind of stuff. So I've really targeted those things. A lot of range of motion work and sort of rotator cuff strengthening, lightweight. You know, I don't care. It might be the biggest guy in the gym, but I'm over there with like 5-pound weights, just, 5-7 pound weights, just doing really defined exercises to improve my rotator cuff strength. That has done remarkable things for that. Lower back and leg, a combination of like planks, core stuff, things of that nature that have really helped stabilize my lower back. And in conjunction with that, I don't want to call it yoga, but I'll call it advanced stretching, which has made a huge difference. Like, after having my piriformis removed and my hamstring reattached, and I had so much tightness, like my IT band, like some days, like you'd sleep on that side and it just felt like a guitar string being plucked, right? And so once I could get back from that injury enough, and I just started stretching, got into the point where I played first base, back in the day, and I could do the splits, right, to pick up a ground ball. And I tried to do it. I'm like a isosceles triangle, man. I couldn't even get close to the ground. So I'm like, I need to start stretching. And within a couple months of serious, really every day, 6-7 days a week, stretching, core stuff in conjunction with my workouts, like I'm pain-free now in my leg. And I was having pain for a year post-operatively. And after 3 months of really intensively focusing on it, pain-free. So those sorts of things, that I've really integrated in. And then, of course, supplementation. I think good growth hormone and testosterone replacement therapy. If you're 45 or older, you ought to be doing those. Your quality of life will be better, just in general. And I'm not talking bodybuilder doses. You're talking a few hundred milligrams every 7 to 10 days of testosterone, that kind of stuff. You're getting back on just the right side of the bell curve of, however many nanograms per milliliter you're supposed to be at. You're just kind of optimizing it, right? You're not going so far out that you're, destroying what nature gave you, but you're optimizing what you have. And if you sort of, if you put everything into that optimal category, you're going to get optimal results.
Yeah, 100%. Well said. It is really great to see the more we bridge the healing arts together and they're not so separated. And we see that in training. I mean, CrossFit kind of did a breakthrough in terms of just integrating all sorts of different arts. And, it had its problems starting out, but now largely there's only the good coaches left per se, and people learned a lot. And even the specialists, I mean, I do see, because I was in the elite training world with Olympic lifting and powerlifting. And of course, there was always the bodybuilders and the strongmen floating around there too, and plus the athletes with it. So we've seen so much of a change to where there was these real boundaries on how you trained some of those types of things that, there's been some, super elite coaches, Louis Simmons is one of them I met, and there's numerous others that came from every one of the actual styles of training. But one thing that did happen, the right and the wrong, even with CrossFit and more of that integrated type of training, is you got to see where people started meshing it together more. And it was just first and foremost a mental breakthrough, once you realize those things. But you also saw the real premises of it. And today too, to combine endurance training with flexibility training, with posture muscle training, not just the big head muscles, body weight training. Whether you do want to do Pilates, I'm a big fan of advanced calisthenics, and even, the differences between ballet and gymnastics. And I always use ballet and gymnastics as a great example because it's been around for so long and people have been training elitely so long. And two different styles. Ballet is much more flowy, and you don't get the muscle tone, where gymnastics is hugely explosive. But what both of them do is everything from the beginning is they train to prevent injuries. And their biggest focus is to improve connective tissue strength and not put on muscle, because they know muscle is a lot easier to make and build and regenerate than connective tissue is. And in like a 12-year-old gymnast, it takes 210 days to regenerate a connective tissue cell, but it takes only 90 days in order to make a muscle cell. And so you put that into perspective. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is you try to get strong too early instead of training those posture muscles and do some of those unique things. Now, you can do squats and deadlifts and cleans and jerks and that stuff from day one, but you just don't want to ignore some of the walking on your hands if you really want to get elite. Like, it's so impressive to see the power lifters, which you could be pretty strong and unathletic and be a super elite power lifter. But when you see the ones that come from a gymnastics background, the son of a bitch walks on his hands 150 yards and then goes out there and benches drug-free 500, and you're like, whoa. You know?
Yeah.
And that's just a whole different animal.
Yeah, it's amazing. The strength to weight ratio of some of those gymnasts are just amazing. Right?
And it's that foundation, and you never have to apologize for that foundation that they get, no matter what you decide to do later in life on those aspects. So, well, now in your professional career, you're still in the medical field, and you've seen a lot. Obviously, things are always going to progress. I have my own ambitions of what I hope to achieve by certain integrations and helping other people and helping other professions of the elite people within those even come together and learn the value of what each other offers, because not one person can do everything. We do a lot in our clinic. I'm very low volume, very high quality, where we just kind of do life overhauls, and pretty much I fire everybody. You're not allowed to see anybody except me. And then as I need people, because I'm not a surgeon, obviously, and I can't do other things, we have people that I will refer that are not under my roof. And where I'm moving into another facility here soon, where it'll be a lot easier to integrate some of the things, because it is an anti-aging clinic with the hormones. Like I said, currently they don't do stem cells, exosomes, a lot of the different nutritional advancements that we do. And that's why they want me in there, is because I refer so many people to them that they saw the big difference of, holy cow, when he's doing this and using our services versus the good work they do just with theirs. But it's a real aha moment, and we get along so good. There's no competition. They're just great, which is unique. It all comes down to the personality with that. But even from yourself, where's some of the things that you may be able to influence, even bridging the consumer world in integrative medicine and anti-aging, but even with your military background, like you would have contacts I do not have and be able to help people and influence them that I could not, because I'm just a nobody in those things.
Yeah, if I was gonna concentrate on one area in the future, and I'm kind of not winding down, but the company I'm with now, looking at potential acquisitions and things like that, or to be acquired. So I may have some changes coming up in the near future, and sort of already started some discussions around there. But I know, we've had a lot of new medicines come on, the Ozempics and the trizepatides and things that are driving weight loss for people and things of that nature. And I mean, I suppose that may be good from a metabolic health standpoint, but there's some dangers that are going along with it too, right? I've had this discussion with my dad. He's older, he's got COPD, he's had bowel cancer and different things. He needed to get some weight off. I'm like, hey, that drug might be the right thing for you. It's not the right thing for a 35-year-old who's been living an unhealthy life, right? And I think I know the Medicare has just authorized like a 5-year study on those and long-term outcomes. And my guess is, my gut feeling is, there are going to be some negative unanticipated outcomes with those things, because they're eating up muscle just like they're eating up fat. And I think people are going to get a whole host of bone wasting, connective tissue problems. And they really, I think, if you could do one thing for the world right now, it's to convince these people that they need to, great, kickstart it with that stuff if you need to, but you got to roll into a lifestyle change. You can't just be dependent on a drug for the next 50 years of your life to help you keep the weight off. And I think we're going to grow a whole class of people that are going to be sort of addicted, so to speak, to that, I'm just going to take a pill for it mentality. And that, we know from, there is not a scientific study in the world that isn't going to tell you it's better to heal your body with diet and exercise and appropriate supplementation than to take a pill that's been, that's been derived to have one specific effect. Like this is gonna dilate your arterial walls, right, to reduce your blood pressure. Well, that's great And, if you're at severe stroke risk, it's probably worth taking it. But how about you, for the last 20 years, you don't get yourself at risk for that stroke to start with, right? And I think we're breeding a whole class of people that are going to be at high risk for dependency on things that are going to have negative side effects.
Well, you're exactly right. And again, it's the standard medical professions that really need to broaden their scope of education and referral network. I mean, they may be busy. I always say a surgeon needs to stay focused. A general physician, right, like even me, I know so many things in detail just because I'm living in this body, and I'm not going to rely on somebody else's answers because I never got the answers that I needed for those. So I know a lot about things that aren't even in my scope of practice, like stem cells. It's not legal for me to inject them. But when I found the highest quality of stem cells, it's like, no, I can buy them at wholesale. I sell distributor accounts to other people for those. And that's my level of influencing it. It doesn't take a lot of talent to stick a needle into somebody, in order to discover those things and manufacture those in different manufacturing processes. But that's, again, for me, where I really see that the clinicians really need to open their eyes, and that's from both situations. And it is great because I do see really positive clinics out there. And like I said, more so the ones that are owned by a natural healthcare practitioner, but they employ the medical doctors with them. But they kind of set and structure the protocols and put everybody, because no person can do everything, nor right. I mean, not even close. But yeah, strength and fitness has so many advantages, and to put the mind of a very progressive strength coach that works on the kid that gets picked last at recess, but yet can develop them over time right. to get a scholarship, those people would make the best doctors, hands down. I mean, because they really work the body, and you just can't be one-dimensional when you train people like that too. You got to change people's eatings. You got to help identify their physical weaknesses, whether it's flexibility, strength, and then at every level of achievement, it's a reset. And that is hugely missing. And then it all goes back down to the farmers and local. So even with us, we really promote local farmers. We obviously don't know everybody. Just this last week, I'm super excited about somebody we met already, but we know who the local farmers are, who's doing the raw dairy. And it's night and day. When we use the local food supply that we have and people just use a grocery store to supplement, the healing is astronomical. And we do very detailed professional eating plans, to the point that if you want to get on stage or you do the MMA weight cuts healthy, you start applying that level of structured nutrition with more freedom for people. It's just remarkable, the healing you see even in the general consumer that was said, this is incurable, you have this autoimmune disease, you have this. And it's like, you're a walking trash can. Who gives a shit what that diagnosis says? Don't blame it on your genetics either. I don't even need to see your genetics test. That's not going to stop us from greatly making huge progress moving forward.
Yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head. A couple things. I've seen a few positive trends. Within sort of the surgical industry or the hospital industry, where you're starting to see integrative medicine teams at some of the good hospitals, right, where they bring 5, 6, 7 different disciplines together when someone's got a real issue, so they can sort it out amongst themselves instead of one person just having the lead and being that hammer in search of a nail. But I'd like to see more and I don't even know where, but a true integrative, holistic MD program at some major universities, right? And where you're really looking at getting an MD, but focused on what you're focused on. How do we maximize this? And you see the anti-aging doctors, you're seeing some of it, but again, that's all self-taught and practiced, really. Yeah. I don't think there's no real pioneering there. I think maybe within the chiropractic field, but certainly not in the MD field, maybe in the DO field to a larger extent. Yeah. But I think there's a lot of room for growth there, and then a lot of room for the sort of mainstream necessitated science to back it up, the long-term clinical studies, the evidence-based medicine, outcome-based medicine type things. They're going to give it more mainstream acceptance, because rightly or wrongly, you look at just how much RFK went through during his thing. And some of his things may be out there. Some of his things are spot on. Like, why do we need a carcinogenic dye when you can use beet dye instead, right? Like, it's just like, doesn't that make sense to everybody? I don't know who would argue against that, right? But I think, in order for it to be mainstreamed, and we've seen this time and time again with medicine, you'll have, it's the adoption curve, right? You have early innovators and early adopters and fast followers, right? And, we need to start looking to bring on, more of the body of the scientific faculty, and so guys like you that are out on the front, we need to start backing that up with some academic programs that are going to mainstream the next generation of folks to lead that.
100%. And it will be interesting. So every school has every professional licensure has their positives. So I don't want to be that guy that just always picks out the wrong things. And so we could see what's being done right. And it's very obvious to see, just look at statistics of where the U.S. compares. I mean, most people think that the U.S. is like leading the charge of modern medicine. And I'm like, when you look at independent analysis, not some crazy chiropractor that came up with this, it's none of mine. You look at like Statista, those types of things. We're second to last in the entire world in first world in medical care. We are second to the last out of 70 first world countries. And that's with them even fudging statistics. Okay. So when we look at that, and I say all the time too, just with, even any natural healthcare school, the stuff that RFK Jr. is talking about, even when people say it sounds outlandish, that is also old news. There's not one new thing that has come up except the facts of the mRNA concerns that are out there, because that's relatively new to the public, even though when you look at Dr. David Martin, he's got 4,000 patents going back to the mid-60s of where they were working on all those things. So it's not new. And that shocks people. And it's too big a jump for them to make. But I don't care what school you are, especially the natural healthcare schools, you're a little bit further ahead of the common sense curve of how the body integrates together, until they put together an organic gardening class to where every single freaking year you have to raise some food, until you do that, you don't get it. You don't get it. And that's not being done anywhere right now, but thank God we have people independently that break off and do that. And I am always so grateful for people in your service and what you do. It's the few and far between that gets pushed to do it. But even the farmers, they're not doing traditional farming. And locally, we hunt those people. And we have found some people that it is amazing how smart they are in the regenerative farming practices that they do. And the quality of food is just through the roof. And we want to support them, and we want to make more of them. And that's ultimately what's going to make a huge change too.
Yeah, I was amazed. I'm an avid, you can see on my wall behind me fishing pictures and hunting pictures, and so I'm avid outdoorsman. And I was, a couple years ago, I was on a pheasant hunt in South Dakota on a giant, 50,000 acre farm. And I ended up not hunting one day because I didn't realize when I got there, it was 100% organic farm. And I drove around with the farm manager. It's actually, corporately owned. But they converted a whole bunch of farms they bought up over to organic. And I saw, I kind of at one point was under the assumption that, hey, organic vegetables, they might be smaller or not, they may be not as pretty or have that quality. Man, when I saw what they were producing, ears of corn is bigger than I've ever seen. A sweet corn that when you bit into it was just as sweet or sweeter. I saw sugar beets that were the size of your head. I was truly amazed by what they were producing. Cabbages that looked as beautiful and as big as any I've ever seen in the store. And yeah, it might be a little bit more expensive, but man, I got to say, that's a small investment, an extra 50 cents or $1 for something if it's really going to contribute to your overall wellness.
Yeah, and that whole industry has so much propaganda led by the food companies and ConAgra and Monsanto as well. It's a lie for people to think we need GMOs because there's too many people on the planet. We can't raise enough food. That's not true at all. Go talk to a legitimate farmer that's doing it on a scale, and just like you said, and that is reproducible. We have so much land in order to grow things on. We're not using 2% of the land, not even properly. And there is no food shortage. It's a lack of doing it the right way.
Yeah, Thomas Malthus was wrong he was wrong in the 70s, and they're probably wrong about it now, right? I honestly, I was kind of a victim to that thought process, for a while too, like until I literally went and saw it with my own eyes and saw, wow, they can produce just as much here, and it's just as good using these organic methods. Okay, at that point I was like, okay, great. And maybe it doesn't work in all regions or all every crop, but let's maximize it to the extent we can.
Yeah, absolutely. And put the people in charge who are doing it the right way, and they are really affecting a population with those things. And we do. I know a small portion of those people, but some of the movers and shakers, people that follow the podcast, we've got some incredible influential people that we've done podcasts on sustainable farming, whether it's raising animals, it's raising vegetables, raw dairy. I mean, we've had some great people on this show because we really want to raise awareness, support local on those things. And, we want to be responsible for sending that message out there to where every small community out there, we add these small sustainable farmers at first. I mean, what you can do on 10 acres is feed thousands of people, with what you can do on there. Not with everything, but, so you build this community network, and it's great going to farmers markets. And some people you don't know if it's not certified organic and those things, but like we have a person just 5 miles down the road. It is so above and beyond their attention to soil prep, heirloom seeds. It is just fantastic, and we get the benefits of being able to buy those things, and I get the benefits of sharing that with my patients. And again, we've hunted the raw dairy farmers. We hunt the grass-fed ranchers in the area so people can buy direct from them. And it is such a night and day effect of what we see in people's recovery and healing processes. And then all of a sudden they're like, holy cow, I thought, I never thought I ate great before, but now...
I'll give you another... Yeah. I'll give you one more reason, just for even if somebody's listening here and they're not, okay, whatever. Taste. My girlfriend, my fiance, she's a chef, and I'm an avid cook. And the taste. I mean, if you go get strawberries that have been locally sourced in season, they are so much better than the stuff you get at a mega grocery store. Same thing with sweet corn, anything. It's night and day better in taste, right? And so I'm a foodie, right? So that alone is good enough reason for me.
Well, it is. Like you said, the quality of life improvement that makes on you, you've obviously been smart. You've done a lot right up to this point. But it is so game-changing and life-changing, people can't even believe it until they start implementing it into their life. So, Captain Gavin, this has been fantastic. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add. We gave people a lot to think of. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your service. Thanks for everything you shared with us. It's going to make an impact on people from a number of different realms. I look forward to when we can meet each other in person, and maybe we'll continue these anti-aging conversations, because I know you're doing a lot of great things and you have contacts that I don't have. And we're on the ground floor. We're working at this every day, continually trying to progress what we do, make relationships, work with people on what they're told is incurable. And once they just put an integrated system together, largely of common sense, even though we do a lot of advanced functional medicine, data analytics, and people really get to learn. I always tell people, it's like, it costs for what we do, and we don't take insurance and those types of things, but this is going to be the best class you ever take. Even if you look at it that way, it's like you won't be able to get this at Harvard or Duke or Stanford. You won't be able to get this education you're going to get in your healing process anywhere, and it's going to completely change your life moving forward from in here, but the physical output as well. And you're doing that as well. So you've already done it on yourself and sharing your experience with other people. So that's great.
Well, absolute pleasure to be here. If any veterans see this and you need anything, don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook, whatever. I'm always here to help, or if you just need somebody to talk to. Veteran suicide is always a major topic, and I've had some friends go that route. So certainly, if anybody's out there and needs a helping hand or an ear, don't hesitate to call. And I hope this is the first of many conversations here. So Absolutely. Look forward to chatting again.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brain Body Fit podcast, where we are dedicated to helping doctors and clients integrate clinical evaluation and performance enhancement. Please like and share this episode with someone who wants to empower their own health and actively participate in the health revolution of the growing millions. Epic changes are real. Visit us at PerformancePractic.com, where you can explore premium selected products and services that we have used to change the lives of thousands in our clinic and seminars for decades. Follow us on our socials. All the links are listed in the podcast description. If you are interested in personalized health programs and want to work directly with Dr. Jerome Rerucha, schedule a paid consultation to apply for starting a 3-month professional supervised healthy eating program. Also available are individual comprehensive restorative care program options with additional lab testing and services. Head over to PerformancePractic.com or simply click the link in the description to learn more and apply.